How does the lack of indigenous machine tool production limit Africa's ability to move beyond raw material exports? How the lack of indigenous machine tool production limits Africa's ability to move beyond raw material exports. For decades, Africa has been described as a continent rich in resources but poor in industrial development. From oil, gas, and copper to cocoa, coffee, and timber, Africa's natural wealth is immense. Yet, most of these resources leave the continent as raw materials rather than processed or manufactured goods. The result is a persistent cycle. Africa exports low-value raw commodities and imports high-value finished products. A critical but often overlooked reason for this imbalance is the absence of indigenous machine tool production. Machine tools, the mother industry of industrialization, are essential for transforming raw resources into usable products. Without them, Africa is locked into a subordinate position in the global economic chain. This article explores how the lack of indigenous machine tool industries restricts Africa's economic growth, hinders industrial diversification, and keeps the continent reliant on external powers. Machine tools, the missing link in Africa's industrialization. Machine tools are devices such as lathes, milling machines, grinders, and CNC systems used to cut, shape, and refine raw materials into precise components. They are the backbone of every modern manufacturing process, from automotive assembly to aerospace, energy systems, agriculture machinery, and medical devices. The absence of machine tool production in Africa means the continent largely imports both the machines needed for industrial activity and the spare parts to maintain them. This dependency has profound consequences. 1. Limits on value addition. The first and most obvious consequence is Africa's difficulty in adding value to its raw materials. Metals and minerals. Africa is home to abundant iron ore, bauxite, cobalt, platinum, and copper reserves. But instead of processing these into steel products, machine components, or high-tech electronics, most are exported in raw form. Why? Because building the plants and equipment to process them requires machine tools that are mostly imported, expensive, and often out of reach. Agriculture. Africa produces cocoa, coffee, cotton, and cashew nuts, but most of the chocolate, textiles, and processed products are made abroad. Without machine tools to manufacture processing equipment locally, African producers remain trapped at the lowest end of the agricultural value chain. This inability to transform raw materials domestically means Africa earns only a fraction of the wealth generated from its resources. For example, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire together supply more than 60% of the world's cocoa, yet the multibillion-dollar global chocolate industry is dominated by Europe and the US. 2. Dependency on foreign machines and spare parts. A second consequence is technical dependence. Industries in Africa rely heavily on imported machines, from textile looms to oil drilling rigs. When these machines break down, spare parts often must be ordered from Europe, Asia, or America. Delays, waiting weeks or months for spare parts slows production and makes local industries unreliable. Costs. Imported parts and machines are paid for in foreign currency, draining scarce reserves and increasing production costs. Vulnerability. Political disputes, sanctions, or trade restrictions can disrupt supply, leaving factories idle. Without indigenous machine tool production, African industries operate at the mercy of external suppliers, limiting competitiveness and growth. 3. Weak domestic manufacturing ecosystem. The machine tool industry is not just about making machines, it anchors a broader manufacturing ecosystem. It fosters skills in precision engineering, metallurgy, design, and software integration. Without this foundation, Africa struggles to develop other sectors such as automotive and aerospace. Countries like South Korea and China built global car and aircraft industries only after investing in domestic machine tool capabilities. Africa lacks the space, so its automotive production is mostly assembly of foreign parts rather than indigenous manufacturing. Defense and energy. Modern defense equipment, turbines, and renewable energy systems all require precision components that can only be produced with machine tools. Africa remains dependent on imports for these critical technologies. Healthcare manufacturing, Africa imports most medical equipment, from surgical instruments to MRI machines, because it lacks the precision engineering base that machine tools enable. This absence perpetuates a shallow industrial base, where African industries consume imported technologies but rarely create them. 4. Stifled innovation and skills development. Machine tools are not just products, they are platforms for innovation and learning. When engineers and machinists design, modify, and build tools, they develop technical expertise that spills over into other industries. In Africa, the reliance on imported tools reduces opportunities for local engineers to experiment, adapt, or innovate. This creates a skills gap. Vocational training often focuses on operating foreign machines, not designing or producing them. Universities graduate engineers without exposure to tool making or precision manufacturing. Local inventors struggle to prototype products because they lack access to advanced machining equipment. The result is a generation of workers prepared for maintenance and assembly, not innovation and industrial leadership. 5. Loss of economic sovereignty. Perhaps the deepest impact of lacking indigenous machine tool industries is the erosion of economic sovereignty. Countries that cannot build their own machines are perpetually dependent on those that can. This has strategic consequences. Trade deficits. Africa imports more in machinery and equipment than it earns from exporting manufactured goods, widening deficits. Policy dependence. Industrial strategy becomes shaped by what foreign suppliers allow, not what local economies need. Geopolitical vulnerability. If global supply chains are disrupted as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa suffers disproportionately. Without the mother industry, Africa's ability to chart an independent path of development is curtailed. What could indigenous machine tool production change? If Africa developed its own machine tool industries, the transformation could be profound. Raw materials to finished goods. Instead of exporting crude oil, Africa could refine and produce petrochemicals, plastics, and synthetic materials. Instead of shipping iron ore, it could produce steel beams, cars, and machinery. Job creation. A machine tool sector would demand highly skilled engineers, machinists, and technicians, creating quality jobs and raising wages. Technology transfer. Domestic production would force mastery of advanced technologies such as CNC systems, robotics, and 3D printing. Export power. Africa could eventually export not only raw resources but also the machines to process them, moving up the global value chain. The way forward. To overcome these limitations, Africa needs a strategic roadmap for machine tool development. Regional hubs. Not every country can develop a full-scale machine tool industry. But regional hubs, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, could specialize in different areas and serve neighboring economies. Public-private partnerships. Governments should work with universities, startups, and established industries to co-invest in tool-making capacity. Skills development. Technical schools and universities must prioritize precision engineering, mechatronics, and tool design. Resource integration. Africa's mineral wealth should be harnessed for local steel, aluminum, and component production instead of being exported raw. Technology leapfrogging. Instead of imitating outdated technologies, Africa could adopt modern CNC and digital manufacturing systems, positioning itself for the fourth industrial revolution. Conclusion. The lack of indigenous machine tool production is one of the silent barriers holding Africa back from industrial transformation. It limits value addition, sustains dependency, stifles skills and innovation, and erodes economic sovereignty. As long as Africa remains a consumer of machine tools rather than a producer, it will remain trapped in the cycle of exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. Breaking this cycle requires a bold investment in the mother industry, one that can turn Africa's abundant resources into engines of prosperity. The question is not whether Africa can afford to build a machine tool industry, but whether it can afford not to. Can Africa achieve real industrial independence without investing in machine tools? For decades, African leaders, economists, and development experts have envisioned a future where the continent is no longer a supplier of raw materials but a hub of industrial power. Africa's abundant resources, growing population, and youthful workforce provide the raw potential for such a transformation. But one crucial question remains: can Africa achieve real industrial independence without investing in machine tools? The short answer is no. Without machine tools, the foundation of manufacturing Africa's industrial dreams risk remaining aspirational. The machine tool industry is often called the mother of all industries because it makes the machines that produce everything else. Without it, African economies cannot fully move up the value chain, cannot build sovereign industries, and cannot break free from dependence on imports. This article explores why machine tools are indispensable for Africa's industrial independence, what happens without them, and what a path forward might look like. Why machine tools matter for industrial independence. 1. The foundation of manufacturing. Machine tools such as lathes, milling machines, presses, grinders, and CNC systems are used to cut, shape, and fabricate parts for all types of machinery. From tractors and turbines to cars and computers, every piece of equipment requires components that are produced with machine tools. If Africa lacks its own machine tool industry, it must rely on imports to build factories, assemble products, and maintain equipment. This means industrial sovereignty is compromised at its very foundation. 2. The multiplier effect across sectors. Machine tools are not confined to a single industry, they power them all. Agriculture needs them to build processing plants, construction needs them for heavy equipment, energy needs them for turbines and pipelines, and healthcare requires them for surgical instruments and diagnostic machines. Investing in machine tools doesn't just build one sector, it builds all sectors. Without this multiplier effect, Africa risks stagnating in shallow industrial development. 3. The innovation platform. Machine tools are more than hardware. They represent precision, innovation, and advanced engineering. When countries design and produce their own machine tools, they foster a culture of technical mastery and innovation. Without this, African engineers may be trained to operate imported machines but rarely to design or innovate. What happens without machine tools? If Africa continues to industrialize without indigenous machine tool capacity, several structural problems persist. 1. Dependency on imported machinery. African industries today import nearly all of their equipment. For instance, textile mills rely on looms from China or India, while food processing plants use European machines. When these break down, spare parts must be shipped from abroad, creating costly delays and downtime. This dependency keeps African industries vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, trade restrictions, and currency fluctuations. 2. Raw material trap. Africa's wealth lies in natural resources, minerals, oil, cocoa, coffee, and timber. But without machine tools, the continent cannot easily process these resources into higher value products. Cocoa becomes chocolate abroad. Bauxite becomes aluminum elsewhere. Iron ore becomes steel overseas. Thus, Africa remains trapped in the low-value end of the global economy. 3. Skills gap and limited industrial ecosystem. Without machine tool production, Africa cannot fully develop the technical skills needed for industrial independence. Local universities and training centers may teach mechanical engineering, but without real tool-making industries, graduates lack hands-on experience in precision manufacturing. This prevents the growth of a self-sustaining ecosystem where engineers, machinists, designers, and innovators collaborate to advance local industry. 4. Economic and political vulnerability. Countries that cannot make their own machines remain dependent on those that can. This dependence is not just economic but geopolitical. During crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa was left behind in access to medical equipment partly because it lacked domestic manufacturing capabilities. Lessons from other regions. History shows that no country has achieved industrial independence without machine tools. Germany and Japan built global reputations in precision engineering because they invested heavily in machine tool innovation. Their automotive and electronics industries are direct beneficiaries. China recognized in the 1980s that it could not rise without machine tools. By prioritizing machine tool industries, it became the world's largest manufacturer and exporter. India has developed domestic hubs for CNC machines and robotics, enabling Make in India manufacturing strategies. These cases demonstrate a universal truth: industrial power rests on machine tool capacity. Africa cannot be an exception. Can Africa rely on foreign machine tools instead? Some argue Africa does not need its own machine tool industries. It can import machines from established producers and focus on other sectors like agriculture or services. While imports may help in the short term, they create long-term dependency. Costs: importing tools drains foreign reserves and raises production costs. Vulnerability: if geopolitical tensions disrupt supply, industries collapse. Limited growth: import reliance discourages the development of local innovation, keeping Africa permanently behind. Thus, relying on imports cannot deliver true independence. At best, it creates assembly economies that remain dependent on external supply chains. What would investment in machine tools achieve for Africa? If Africa builds its own machine tool capacity, the results could be transformative. Value addition: Ghana could process cocoa into chocolate locally. Guinea could turn bauxite into aluminum. Nigeria could refine oil into petrochemicals. Job creation: skilled jobs in engineering, design, and machining would absorb Africa's large youth population, reducing unemployment. Technology leadership: indigenous machine tool industries would push Africa into advanced fields such as robotics, CNC automation, and 3D printing. Economic sovereignty: with domestic capacity, Africa could design its own industrial policies, free from dependency on foreign suppliers. The way forward: achieving real industrial independence will require a strategic and collective approach. Regional hubs: Africa does not need every country to build a full machine tool industry. Instead, regional centers, South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, could specialize and serve wider markets. Education and training: technical schools must emphasize tool design and machining, not just operation of imported systems. Public-private partnerships: governments should support startups, innovators, and joint ventures with foreign firms to build local tool-making capacity. Resource integration: Africa's mineral wealth should be harnessed for domestic steel, alloys, and precision materials. Technology leapfrogging: Africa can skip outdated paths and adopt modern CNC, AI-driven manufacturing, and additive technologies directly. Conclusion: industrial independence means more than having factories or assembly plants. It means having the capacity to build, repair, and innovate with the machines that sustain industries. Without investing in machine tools, Africa cannot break the cycle of raw material exports and import dependency. Machine tools are not optional, they are the entry ticket into real industrial sovereignty. Just as no child can be born without a mother, no industrial future can be born without the mother industry. For Africa, the path to independence must begin with the machines that build all other machines. The challenge is daunting, but the alternative, remaining forever dependent on others, is far costlier. Africa's industrial future lies in its ability to build its own tools.